Hello, my name is Mia Gio, and this is my MSW final exam project. So, as an introduction, I'd like to introduce two clients who are currently on one case. I am with CYFD in the Permanency Planning Unit. The first client is going to be named P. Carter. Carter is a moniker last name. They are biological siblings. One of them is 16 years old. She has a psychological diagnosis of disruptive mood dysregulation disorder, as well as attention deficit hyperactivity disorder combination type. For social interactions, they are both very limited with family support as well as social supports outside of their family units, and both do not have any spiritual affiliations, even though they have gone to church and other activities throughout their life. So the second sibling is 14 years old, and she has been diagnosed with bipolar 2 and also attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Um, Again, both siblings have lived together off and on throughout their lives and have continued to forge a bond as sisters and are currently considered a sibling group with the Child, Youth, and Families Department. So, for the CSWE Core Competency 1, demonstrating ethical professional behavior, ethical dilemmas that have been faced for this case particularly concerning myself in the case is how minor my involvement is. This case will be ongoing. It is currently in the legal realm of a case that has entered Child, Youth, and Families Department. So I have made it very clear to both of my clients that I am working with them right now, but when May comes, I will see my way out of the case, and their permanent planning caseworker, my supervisor, Liliana Gallegos, will continue to work with them. That is an ethical dilemma because we like to see that there's continued care and that these children will be looked after throughout the time that they're with the department. Another thing that would be an ethical dilemma is self-determination, the idea of who knows best, especially because both of these children are actually adolescents and they do have a right to understand what's going on. They have a right to request a credit report, and they have a right to know that the department will do anything possible to help them develop skills necessary to become functional adults. So when we think about that, like who knows best, the NASW says that social workers have to pursue social change and that we have to be very informative with our clients, especially because in this event they are minors. And so you have to decide like how much of the self-determination are you going to accept and how much of it is going to be within your best interest, and also in to work as a competent social worker to say, I believe that this is what's going to be best for these children at this time. That also bleeds into the idea of the option for adoption versus placement, and placement with a guardian or aging out. So if they are placed with the guardian and they are given the ability to age out, are we going to be doing everything possible to help prepare them to be adults in this world? So the best case scenario is placement right now. So both of these children are actually in residential treatment centers, and they are pursuing treatment plans. And so one of the things that we have to watch out for is their healthcare coverage. And one of the concerns that has arisen in the past has been that one of the children was no longer considered eligible for her placement, and she was actually discharged within the day. We had to seek emergency placement for her, and then we had to find a new placement, and it had to be not only meeting her needs, but also eligible for her health care. So this is very important, and they are very ethical dilemmas because the idea is that these are children, and they're looking to us as social workers and as caseworkers and to myself to take care of them and to understand what's going on in their case legally, and then also what's going to be best for them in their well-being. For core competency 2, engaging diversity and difference in practice, intersectionality is extremely important. It is a perspective that says that we can simultaneously occupy multiple positions and sections of our lives that are social, cultural, political, and they just are all part of the fabric of society. So all of the people who are involved in this case all are functioning people in society, and we all adhere to the specific roles that we need to. So this is extremely important for these children because they are, number one, children, adolescents. They are under the age of 18 years of age. They are in foster care, which is a huge part of the sections of their lives right now because they do not have an adult who is currently looking after them. They have been relinquished by their adoptive mother. So for core competency 2, again, we're engaging in diversity. The 3 dimensions that I wanted to look for was the fact that they're social minorities because foster children do not make up the majority of children who are in school, who are walking around in everyday society. So they are the ethnic majority. Both of them do identify as straight white females, and that is something that comes with privilege at times, but in some instances, such as being placed in the placement that they do have, it has been difficult for them because they do not look the way that other children look, and they do not act the way that other children act, and those are things that we have to take into account when we're offering care. Another thing is the lack of program support and policy support. So there is support for children, but not always and outside of child welfare. We've seen a huge kickback in education that says that, a teacher wants to know, why is this child in care? What's going on? How can we help them? In some ways that's important, but another aspect of that is the confidentiality of this child and the importance that we have in guarding their case and making sure that whatever information does come out that it's within their rights to know, and that everything else is kept private and is secure so that way the children who are involved feel safe. Another thing that is important for a dimension is the social and community support that these children do or do not receive. So this is a huge dimension because these children are in school and they are in residential treatment programs and they need community support. They need their social worker. They need all of these people. And this section of their life is completely centered around, do they get the help that they need? Is it adequate? And are they safe? So for core competency 3, human rights and social economic environmental justice, the social justice that I wanted to focus on was the dimension of an intersectionality that they have that's based around the fact that they are foster youth. So aging out and the need for continued care. Both of these children do have high needs. They are both very much a part of the foster youth system right now. And F. Carter is one of the ones who is going to need continued care even as an adult because she does exhibit violent behaviors. She has actually broken her former foster mom's nose. There has been a lot of concern about addressing these behaviors and these needs. And what does that mean for her? And are we doing everything possible to make sure that she continues to be an upstanding citizen and does not find her way into the criminal justice system? Social support is huge in this event as well because it has been seen that when you have social support, you are more likely to thrive. And another thing about that is barriers to employment. Sometimes you need to know people in order to get jobs. You need to know people to help build social skills and then also to live a happy and successful life. Barriers to education is another concern for foster youth. Foster youth have a difficult time going to college and retaining a job at the same time without having adequate support. General family involvement and involvement with CYFD in general, it sometimes is frowned upon by not only foster youth, but also other individuals in normal communities and societies. So being a part of a marginalized, disenfranchised, vulnerable population is a concern. And what do we do as social workers and as social justice advocates to make sure that these children get every opportunity that they deserve? Reproductive justice is another thing that's extremely important for this case because both of these individuals are within the proper amount of time for biological fecundity. They have the ability to procreate, and that's something that we need to take into account. One of the biggest things that concerns me as their caseworker and as a social worker is the fact that sometimes there's multi-systemic issues that evolve from this reproductive justice issue, where maybe these individuals were not given the adequate amount of knowledge and education that comes with sexual reproductive rights. And they need to understand that they have the ability to become mothers and what that means for them, and possibility make the choice to be the kind of mother that should help take care of a child, and if they are even possible or capable of thinking of themselves in that capacity. But it's something that has to be talked about specifically with youth, because they need to understand that it is a possibility. For core competency number 4, engaging in practice-informed research and informed practice. Um, this was actually quite interesting. This article is called "Adoption and Guardianship: a moderated mediation analysis of predictors of post-permanency continuity." So the design method of this was quantitative, and it was a systematic sampling. Um, so the strength of this was it reinforces the importance of offering post-permanency services to families with multiple behavioral problems. This was extremely important to this case because the children who were involved in this case came into the system in 2004. They were adopted by a biological great aunt, and then she relinquished her rights in 2017, which means that they actually came back into care. I tried looking for a research article that talked about this because I wanted to be able to go to them in an informed way and say, this is what research says. So this particular article was done in Illinois, in a rural area, which New Mexico in some ways is considered rural. It's very much a state where we have concentrated populations in some areas and not in others. So the findings were that 8% of post-permanency cases in Illinois re-entered the foster care system, which to me 8% seems like too much, but at the same time, 8% is less than 10%. So 92% of children who entered into the foster care system and were adopted did not re-enter in this time frame, which means that for these children, which is unfortunate, they were an outlying case. Things don't always go as planned, and that's something that we have to keep in mind. But I wanted to have some sort of research to go back to this family and say, or this family, because I consider these two girls a family, definitely, that they are not alone, that there are 8% of children in other places who experienced probably something similar. And at least we know that if this happens to some people, that there's hope that we can do something about it, and then they're not alone in this situation. For the second article that I chose to look at, it was Placement Discontinuity for Older Children and Adolescents Who Exit Foster Care Through Adoption or Guardianship, a Systematic Review. So this was an interesting one because it was actually done as a restricted review of peer articles that were in journals. They used a snowball sampling and then also looked for specific criteria. So they did exclude books. So that was an interesting fact to me where I was like, okay, so there's articles here and this is what it says. But the important part about this is that there was strength in finding different aspects of placement. Placement is a huge part of permanency planning because we want to know that wherever these children are placed, that they will have um, you know, a good chance, a fighting chance at what they want to do and where they want to go. The strengths and weaknesses of this particular article are that it was consistent across the studies that the current state in post-permanency research is generally weak because the studies have been limited to problems related to research method and design. And knowing that makes me wonder about what it looks like for New Mexico in particular. What kind of research do we see coming out of New Mexico that talks about the placement that we have here? As I said, the children in this case particularly are an ethnic majority, but by being white Caucasian females who are straight, there's a lot of privilege there. But at the same time, in New Mexico, they're not the majority, they're the minority. And what does it look like for Native American children in the state of New Mexico or Hispanic Latino community children? The adoption and guardianship is an important aspect because what happens to the children when they're placed? Are they placed through adoption or are they placed through guardianship like the children in this case want to be? They do not want to be adopted. They do want to seek guardianship for the time that they have left, and then when they're 18 years of age, they hope to enter into society as adults. And we need to look at research and figure out what does that look like for them. So the findings were of this review that children do not experience discontinuity after legal finalization of an adoption or guardianship. So looking at that and seeing what guardianship looks like for them is important, because when they are in guardianship, we need to ensure that they are safe first and foremost. Knowing that there's research out there and looking at a cumulative research is extremely important to them and helping them make an informed decision. So my job as a social worker is to continue to be competent and to practice with evidence-based practices and to understand what's going on and how to guide them. And their responsibility is to have a form of self-determination, to decide for themselves, is this what I want to do? And how am I going to do this? And how am I going to utilize these resources? So together, by using something like this, a systematic review, we can look at different options and see this study in this place said this particularly. So they rigorously examined guardianship families after legalization finalization. And although there was informative articles, they saw that guardianship was identified as a great strategy, or at least a usable strategy, to see different types of analyses and of observational data about, is there a significant proportion of children who are going through this, and are they satisfied with guardianship, and is it going to be something that is stable and safe? So again, with stability and safety, those are the two things that are extremely important to myself as their caseworker and to CYFD in general. So to continue on with core competency number 4, engaging in practice, the things that I have a recommendation for after reading both of these articles is that there needs to be therapeutic intervention. They are currently placed in residential treatment centers, and this is in some ways a very good thing because it helps them with the behavioral issues that their family had experienced with them, and it also shows that they're trying to work towards something and having self-care and understanding what it means to be young adults and what it looks like in the future as well. Both of them have been trying throughout this process, and it's important for them to continue to do so. Another recommendation that I have is a legal sibling split, because separating these siblings would be extremely important. It has been shown throughout personal narratives that have been supplied to the department by former guardians as well as their former adoptive mother who has relinquished rights, that they are dangerous to each other. They do pose each other harm, and that a lot of the time they don't get along to the point where they have lived apart separately before because it was in their best interest. Looking at that and trying to figure out what's suitable and sustainable for both of them is something that's very important, and we're going to look further into that. Now, the thing that's the most recommended is the guardianship placement, because as I said before, in terms of the MSW Code of Ethics, one of the things that I have to do is respect their self-determination. Even though they are minors, it's important for me to understand that both of these children do not wish to be adopted. They have been adopted once, and they both have firsthand experience and have stated to the department that they did experience trauma post-adoption from their adoptive mother and other family members in their lives, and that they do not feel that anybody in their family is capable of taking care of them or adopting them in a way that they should. Their belief in the fact that there may be a stable, loving home for them does not exist right now. And that's something that, as a social worker, I have to be cognizant of and I have to respect. So if they want to be in a guardianship of some sort, then that's something that is accomplishable. Looking at what their options look like post 18 is another thing that is very important. We'll continue with best practice and also using all of our efforts to make sure that they are safe and that they have the life skills that they need to continue on. So for the core competency number 5, engaging in policy practice, the policy that we're looking at right now is the adoption of Safe Families Act in 1997, the ASFA. So I've been talking a lot about guardianship versus adoption, and that's one of the things that's extremely important to both of the children who are involved in this case. So it's important to look at this because the Adoption and Safe Families Act of 1997 does put a timeline on the amount of time that an agency who is funded federally, in our case in New Mexico, the Child, Youth, and Families Department, to find suitable placement for them. So the timeline is 15 months once things become legal. And that is a pro in many ways because it's a push and like putting an impetus on the fact that we need to do something about this. We need to find these children safe homes and adequate surroundings so that they can continue to live their lives in the best way possible. So one of those things that we have to keep in mind, though, is that while that produces a great amount of accountability, that there are cons to that. It makes it inflexible for the families that are involved, especially if they're trying to work a reunification plan or there's interested parties who really want to make an effort to be there for the children who are involved in cases with CYFD. So looking at that and thinking about the pressure that that creates not only on the caseworker but on the family as well is something that needs to be considered. So I'm not sure that there's a recommendation that is like a one size fit all, but in terms of recommendation, I would recommend that there would be a way to address the inflexibility and maybe extend the 15 months. I know that extending a timeline would be bad, especially considering it's almost a year and a half time frame to try and find a suitable placement. But if a family is truly working and they're trying to figure out the best possible way to take care of their children and to become sustainable, safe, supportive adults in a child's life, I feel that that would be important to recognize and support, especially because drug addictions don't just get cured overnight. Alcohol addictions don't get cured overnight. Sometimes incarceration can last longer than 18 months. And willingly separating a family and making this happen because there's one law out there that says this has to happen with 15 months and then bringing the hammer down, that's something that does not resonate very well with me as far as being a social worker goes. I understand both sides of that measure, and I understand that there was an extreme need to make this happen, especially because of the amount of children who were aging out of the foster care system around this time frame and how many children were not being placed and who were not being taken care of. There had to be something that needed to be done. But now I think that there has been enough time between 1997 and 2017 to 2018 to revisit this act and understand that maybe we could do something different now that the child welfare structure as a complete system has adapted to this new federal mandate. All right, so core competency number 6, engaging individuals, groups, families, and organizations and communities. Bias and self-reflection. So my bias would be who knows best, because in a lot of ways, I mean, I am just a student, but I'm more than that. I'm a professional and I'm about to go into the workforce and make a true impact on others' lives. So am I going to make a decision that's going to impact these children's lives based on the amount of the amount of interaction that I have with them? Yes, I am. And I need to be very aware of that fact. I need to look at their age and their self-determination. And I need to think about those options and look at resources for them, which, again, looking at the research articles and everything that I have so far and trying to apply that to my practice is important because there is a bias there. I'm a very young individual, and in some ways, I know for myself, in terms of self-reflection, that I do have rose-colored glasses in a lot of ways. And I need to be aware of that. And I need to understand that best case scenario is not necessarily what I think, and it has to be in line with policy. It has to be in line with what the law reflects, and it has to be in the best interest of the client, regardless of what I think and say. So the way that I'm going to circumvent this or consider what to do is by developing self-awareness. I need to seek supervision from a social worker who's been practicing much longer than I have, and to follow up with policy and laws and everything else that come to mind. And one of the one things that I need to definitely be aware of and to always engage in is referring out when I know that I'm not the most competent person to be doing any sort of task, whether it be um, something with the case or I know that I've become too involved. I need to seek supervision and refer to someone who will do what's in the best interest of the client. And that's one of those things that I'm sure will become a little more first instinct as time goes on. But right now, I'm at the point where I need to continually remind myself that I think that it should be this way, but I need to make sure and I need to ask, like, is this exactly what needs to happen, and is this in line with everything that everything that needs to happen for the case, especially because things are on a timeline. I just mentioned an act that's very important that puts 15 months in perspective and about how much can happen within that time frame. This case is rather odd in that they were relinquished and everything went very quickly. There was no reunification plan. It went straight from being adopted to being back in the care of the state. For CSWE Core Competency 7, Assessing Individuals, Families, Groups, Organizations, and Communities, the assessment that I chose to look at, or the things that I think are important for me, would be narrative therapy, to continue to talk with both of the clients and to understand what's going on with them. I believe that it would be cathartic for both of them to continue to talk to not only me as their caseworker and my supervisor, who is going to be their continued caseworker after I leave this case, but to really process with the residential treatment center therapist and to talk about the experiences that they have. I know that in some ways that narrative therapy can be seen as triggering, but I think that at their age and what they've been through in their lives, it would be extremely important for them to find that sort of acceptance. So existentialism and foster care issues, foster children often ask why. Why was I neglected and abused? Why was I relinquished? Why was this plan not ever seen all the way through? Why have I been put in one therapy program after another and they don't work? So these sorts of things need to be addressed now, so that way when they are adults, they have the capabilities and the tools that they need to find those answers. Another important thing would be the social learning theory. Addressing problems and behaviors associated with past trauma would be extremely important for both of these girls, especially because they do have behaviors that have made them dangerous in some ways to each other and to others around them. By taking accountability for their actions and what they've been through, I think that it would be extremely important for them to continue to do this, and for the therapist and their caseworker like myself to understand that they are adolescents and that they're currently in a specific stage in their life and that their life cycle has been stunted in a way. Because if you look at any theory of life cycle, they don't exactly fit into that mold. They're not right now at the point where their parents are preparing them to go out into the real world and cycling into a new lifestyle. They're at a point where they have a caseworker looking after them and telling them this is what needs to happen. A, B, and C need to occur. And I know that that's the best case scenario right now, but it's not in line with what we say as social workers and as psychologists and every other people who use the life cycle theory say that they should be doing. So social change to achieve stability is important. Understanding where they are uh, their in their cognitive development is important. Linares et al. In 2015 really examined what it meant for foster care children to have social learning theory be applied to their behaviors, so that that way they would continue to be siblings who have positive interactions with one another, even though they have been in situations where they have been maltreated. So it was shown in this study that social learning theory, when applied correctly, can help children who have behavioral issues with one another to have a more stable and safe interaction with one another. Okay, so for intervention, following the case plan is important because, as I said, there's a 15-month timeline on this, but at the same time, there's a bigger timeline looming for both of them. One of them is 2 years away from being 18, and the other one is 6 years away from being 18. And it's extremely important to keep that in mind. For myself, implementing motivational interviewing techniques whenever I see them. I do monthly visits and I make sure that they're doing okay. When there are phone calls, I do try and answer and be a part of them, even though their current caseworker, who is there Monday through Friday, does definitely catch a lot of that as well. And to offer support, especially because I'm I'm at an age and a time in my life where I can offer support in a different way that I didn't know that I could before. And it's extremely important as a social worker to continue to do that and to be an advocate for them to make sure that everything needs to go the way that it should. Referring out for psychological examinations is also important. It's going to be extremely helpful for both of them to know where they're at psychologically and also to work with their social systems to create new support systems. So trying to figure out who their guardians are going to be, what that's going to look like for them, and what it's going to look like for them as adults, and how they can seek help in other not only interventions but benefits that they are entitled to have. So for core competency 8, for goals, offering support to clients is a complete as they complete the residential treatment center information is extremely important. So finding suitable placement with a safe family member is something that both of them had said that they're open to. So there is a family member that has been identified for each child, one from a paternal side and one from a maternal side, one of them that has never really been involved in their lives, and another one that has been involved, but the situation was not ideal at the current point in time. We're exploring those options right now. So by making that a goal to try and find a safe family member, even for placement or possibly potentially guardianship, would be ideal. Now, we're going to work to have efforts to make that happen, but we're always going to keep their safety in mind first before the idea of family. So, family is always important, but we need to make sure that they are absolutely safe. So, for core competency 8, again, the objectives that we're seeing right now and that I would like to implement would be to attend a team decision meeting to potentially split them as a sibling group. So that way they do not have to be placed in the same home as long as they are considered unsafe to each other. And we will monitor that and make sure that in the residential treatment centers that they do participate in family treatment therapy and figure out exactly where they stand. Another objective would be to continue to conduct home visits and to work with them as they're going through this process and to work with their family members. So I do have contact with their family members and I'm trying to establish those relationships. Both of the aunts who are interested, one of them's paternal and the other one's maternal, have agreed to start family therapy with them as well. So as long as they're in treatment foster care and they are going through the process of doing family therapy, we can consider them as guardianship as long as that's what the girls would choose to do. So for core competency 9, evaluating practice in individuals with families, groups, organizations, and communities, I need to consider the NASW Code of Ethics at all times, to make sure to use the theoretical framework in the helping process model, to again use department policy and supervision. So I had stated before that those are things that I need to keep in mind, and I continue to stand by that. I need to make sure that at all times I am not imposing my beliefs and what I think is best for them, and continuing on to make sure that they have the best possible care, that I'm making sure to advocate for what they believe is important for them, but also keeping their safety in mind is extremely important. So the use of theoretical framework and helping with the helping process model, I need to make sure that while I'm in this case, that I do my due diligence and that I terminate the case correctly, that I make sure that they know that while I'm here for them now, they need to know that the caseworker that who is my supervisor will be there for them in the future, especially because children in foster care do tend to have issues with abandonment, especially these children. I understand that they do because of the nature of how they came into care at this current point in time. They were relinquished to the state, and understanding that safe adults don't just come and go, that they do have their best interest at heart is extremely important to me. While doing that, I need to also keep in mind department policy, understanding that there are timelines and there are things that are important that need to happen. And like number one, their safety, number two, their permanency, number three, their well-being. So keeping all those things in mind and always constantly seeking supervision is going to be what's going to be best for these children. understanding where they're coming from and why is one of the main things. Listening to them, as I said, with narrative therapy and continuing to be their champion and their advocate in the time that I have left with them is one of the most important things and one of the ways that I can evaluate my involvement with their case. So for evidence-based practices, I kind of glossed over it and I apologize, but solution-based casework is exactly what's happening here. I mean, I'm trying to outline an objective. I'm trying to make sure that these goals are met and that the and that there's a solution, that there's something that these girls can look forward to in the end, that they get out of residential treatment care, that they get into treatment foster care, and eventually, if they so choose to age out via and having guardianship, then that's their choice, and that I've done everything in my power during the time that I'm with them to make sure that those things happen. So yeah, hopefully with all of these tools of evaluation in mind, I can continue to provide competent care during the time that I have with these children. And these are the references. Again, thank you very much for your time and consideration. And I am very happy that I got to work with these children. And I'm really, I feel like a lifelong learner, that I have a lot to learn from them just as much as they have to gain from me. And I truly hope that our association is a positive one and something that's not only enlightening, but makes them understand that there are safe adults out there and that there is hope for them as young adults to try and integrate into society the way that they want to and should. Alrighty, that's it for me. Thank you. Bye.